I am Olive, 32 years old. Ever since I was 16, I worked multiple jobs, saving every penny for my dream home. After years of sacrifice, I finally purchased my first house at 28. When my parents faced financial hardship, I opened my doors to them temporarily. Little did I know that my generosity would be betrayed in the worst way. I still remember standing frozen in shock, watching them pack my belongings like I was the intruder. Before I tell you how I went from homeowner to homeless in one day, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by family. Growing up, I always felt like I lived in my younger sister Audrey's shadow. From the moment she was born when I was 4, my parents treated her differently. They called her their little princess, their golden child. While I had to earn my allowance by doing chores around the house, Audrey received money just for existing. When I wanted new clothes for school, I was told to save up. When Audrey wanted the latest fashion, my parents would take her shopping that weekend. I remember my 16th birthday when I asked for help buying a used car. My parents said they couldn't afford it and suggested I get a job. 6 months later, on Audrey's 16th birthday, they surprised her with a brand new compact car with a big red bow on top. The look of pity she gave me as she dangled her keys still burns in my memory. "Sorry you had to work for yours, Olive," she said with a shrug that wasn't sorry at all. Despite this, I didn't resent Audrey at first. She was my little sister, and I loved her. It wasn't her fault our parents placed her on a pedestal. But as we got older, Audrey began to exploit this favoritism. She became entitled, expecting everyone to cater to her needs, just as our parents did. By 18, I was working 2 part-time jobs while maintaining a 3.9 GPA. I worked weekends at a coffee shop and evenings at a restaurant, coming home exhausted to complete my homework late into the night. Meanwhile, Audrey barely maintained a C average, spending most of her time at parties and with her various boyfriends. When college acceptance letters arrived, I received a partial scholarship to State University, but still needed to cover most expenses myself. I took out minimal loans and continued working throughout college, often taking morning classes so I could work afternoon and evening shifts. Audrey, despite her mediocre grades, got into the same university because our parents paid for a private tutor to boost her SAT scores. They covered her full tuition, bought her a newer car for the commute, and gave her a generous monthly allowance. She lasted exactly 1.5 semesters before dropping out, claiming college was too stressful and not for her. While I was pulling all-nighters to finish my marketing degree, Audrey bounced between retail jobs never lasting more than a few months at each. She'd quit because a manager was mean to her, or because the schedule was too demanding. Each time our parents would comfort her and assure her she'd find something better. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm. The pay wasn't great, but I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates and putting away as much money as possible. My dream was to own my home before 30. For 6 years, I saved aggressively. I packed lunches instead of eating out. I rarely took vacations. When friends invited me to expensive outings, I often declined. Every promotion and raise went straight to my house fund rather than lifestyle upgrades. Audrey's life took a different path. She moved in and out of our parents' house repeatedly, usually after relationship breakups or job losses. She cycled through boyfriends quickly, each relationship ending dramatically. Our parents always welcomed her back, converting their home office into Audrey's room, even though she was approaching her mid-20s. By 28, I had finally saved enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The day I signed those mortgage papers was one of the proudest moments of my life. "I did it," I whispered to myself as I clutched the keys. No help from anyone, just years of hard work and sacrifice. For the first time, I allowed myself some optimism about the future. I had a growing career, a home of my own, and the independence I'd worked so hard to achieve. I spent weekends painting walls, planting a small garden in the backyard, and gradually furnishing each room with carefully selected pieces that reflected my style. My peaceful existence lasted exactly 8 months. The call came on a Sunday evening. My mother was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Through her sobs, I pieced together what had happened. My father had been laid off from his job of 20 years. 2 weeks later, my mother had been diagnosed with a condition requiring expensive medication, not fully covered by their insurance. With only one income and mounting medical bills, They had fallen behind on their mortgage payments. The bank was threatening foreclosure. "We don't know what to do, Olive," my mother sobbed. "We might be homeless next month." I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew what was coming next. "Is there any way we could stay with you just for a few months until Dad finds a new job and we can get back on our feet?" Every instinct told me to say no. I had just established my own space. I valued my privacy and independence. And somewhere deep down, I knew my parents wouldn't respect my boundaries. But how could I refuse shelter to my own parents? What kind of daughter would that make me? "Of course you can stay with me," I heard myself say. "But just until you get back on your feet, right?" "Absolutely," my father assured me suddenly on the line. "3 months tops. We'll be out of your hair before you know it." We established some basic ground rules. They would take the guest bedroom. They would contribute to groceries and utilities. They would respect that I still needed to work from home sometimes and required quiet during business hours. And most importantly, this arrangement was temporary. Looking back, I realized my biggest mistake wasn't letting them move in. It was believing they would honor their word. 2 days later, my parents arrived with a moving truck containing far more belongings than anyone would pack for a temporary stay. They had furniture boxes of kitchen supplies, multiple suitcases of clothing, and even some of their wall art. I stood in my driveway watching in dismay as they unloaded what appeared to be half their house. "I thought you were just bringing essentials," I said, as my father carried in a large flat-screen TV. "Well, we need to be comfortable, honey," my mother replied, directing the placement of a recliner that was definitely not going to fit in the guest room. "We can't live out of suitcases for months." By evening, my neatly organized home had been transformed. My parents had rearranged the living room furniture to accommodate their recliner. My carefully curated kitchen cabinets had been reorganized to make space for their pots and appliances. Even my guest room closet had been emptied of my storage items to make room for their clothing. "We'll just put your things in the garage for now," my mother said, as if she were doing me a favor. I bit my tongue, reminding myself this was temporary. Just a few months. I could manage for a few months. The first week was awkward but manageable. I adjusted my routine, waking up earlier to have some quiet time before my parents rose. I stayed later at the office some days just to have space to myself. I reminded myself that I was doing the right thing, helping family in their time of need. But small irritations quickly mounted. My mother constantly critiqued my lifestyle. My food choices were too processed. My work hours were unhealthy. My furniture was cheaply made. Each comment was delivered with a smile, as if she were merely trying to help. "You should really eat breakfast, Olive. No wonder you're looking tired lately. That couch won't last 5 years. You should have invested in something better quality. Do you really need to work until 8? That can't be good for your social life." My father was less critical, but equally invasive. He'd adjust the thermostat without asking. He'd watch TV at high volume while I was on work calls. He'd answer my doorbell as if it were his house, inviting the mail carrier or delivery person in for water on hot days. By week 3, something else began happening. My sister Audrey started appearing regularly for family dinners. At first it was once a week, then twice. Then nearly every evening she'd show up around 6, often staying until well after I'd gone to bed. During these dinners, I became increasingly invisible. My parents and Audrey would reminisce about family vacations, conveniently forgetting that I'd stayed home to work during many of them. They'd discuss neighbors and family friends I barely knew, because I'd been too busy working to socialize. They'd make plans for weekend activities without including me, even though we were sitting at my dining table in my house. One evening, I came home to find 6 unfamiliar cars parked in my driveway and along the street. Inside, my parents were hosting a dinner party for their friends. My dining table had been expanded, with a folding table I'd never seen before. My kitchen was overtaken by women preparing food, none of whom I recognized. "Oh, Olive," my mother exclaimed when she saw me standing in the doorway. "I meant to text you. We're having a little get-together with some friends from church. You remember the Hendersons, don't you? And the Clarks?" I didn't remember them. And I certainly hadn't agreed to host a dozen strangers in my home. "Mom, you can't just invite people over without asking me first. This is my house." A uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. The women exchanged glances. "Don't be rude, Olive," my mother whispered sharply. "These are our friends. They've been supporting us through this difficult time." I retreated to my bedroom seething but unwilling to create a scene in front of strangers. That night, I could hear laughter and conversation until nearly midnight while I tried to sleep before an early meeting. The next morning, I tried to establish clearer boundaries. Mom, Dad, I need you to check with me before inviting people over, I said firmly as we sat at the breakfast table. And I need advance notice if Audrey is coming for dinner so I can plan accordingly. My father looked offended. We raised you better than this, Olive. Family doesn't need an invitation. We took you to friends' houses all the time when you were growing up, my mother added. We never made you ask permission to have friends over. Why are you being so controlling? Because it's my house, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I paid for it. My name is on the mortgage. After everything we've done for you, my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. All the sacrifices we made, and now you're treating us like unwanted guests. The guilt trip worked. I apologized, retreating once again. The situation deteriorated further when I returned home one day to find my home office completely rearranged. My desk had been moved to face the wall instead of the window. My bookshelves had been shifted to the opposite wall. Even my computer and monitors had been repositioned. What happened in here? I asked my mother, who was reading in the living room. Oh, your father and I thought this layout would be better. The old arrangement was blocking the energy flow. This is much better feng shui. I stared at her, speechless. They had touched my work equipment, moved my carefully organized materials, and rearranged the one room in the house that was exclusively mine. You can't just come into my office and move things around, I said, my voice shaking. I had everything set up the way I needed it for work. Don't be dramatic, Olive. We improved it. The natural light was causing glare on your screen before. This led to our first major argument. For the first time, I raised my voice to my parents in my own home, insisting they return my office to its original state. They reluctantly complied, but the atmosphere became noticeably cooler. My mother's passive-aggressive comments increased. My father spoke to me less. Around this time, I began hearing more about Audrey's housing situation. Apparently, she and her latest boyfriend, Tyler, were having problems with their apartment. Their landlord was unfairly raising their rent. The neighbors were unreasonably complaining about noise. The location was suddenly too far from Audrey's new job. It's really becoming unlivable, Audrey complained during dinner. Tyler and I are thinking of looking for a new place, but everything is so expensive now. I noticed my parents exchanging glances during these conversations. At the time, I thought they were merely concerned about Audrey's situation. I didn't realize they were silently communicating about plans that would soon upend my life. 6 weeks after my parents moved in, I needed to travel for work. A major client was launching a new product, and as their account manager, I needed to be on site for the 5-day event. It was an important opportunity for me professionally, one that could lead to a promotion if handled well. I was hesitant to leave my parents alone in my house for 5 days, but I had no choice. The morning of my departure, I left detailed notes about house maintenance, emergency contacts, and my expected schedule. Please don't make any changes to the house while I'm gone, I said explicitly, and let me know if anyone else will be coming over. Of course, dear, my mother said with a smile that should have warned me. Don't worry about a thing. Just focus on your work. I tried to do just that. The first 2 days of my business trip went well. I was fully immersed in the client event, working long hours, but feeling satisfied with the results. On the 3rd day, I received a text from my neighbor, Carol. Hey, Olive, just checking if everything's okay. Noticed a lot of activity at your house today. Looks like someone else moving in. My heart sank. I called Carol immediately. There's a young couple carrying in boxes and furniture, she explained. A blonde woman about your age and a tall guy with dark hair. Your parents seem to be helping them. I knew instantly it was Audrey and Tyler. With shaking hands, I called my mother. Oh, did Carol call you? My mother said casually. Yes, Audrey and Tyler are having some trouble with their apartment. The ceiling started leaking and they needed a place to stay urgently. We told them they could use your 3rd bedroom temporarily. You don't mind, do you? It's an emergency. What could I say from 1,000 miles away that my sister should stay in a hotel rather than an empty bedroom in my house? I would look heartless. Once again, I was cornered into agreement. Just until I get back, I insisted. Then we need to discuss this properly. Of course, dear. Don't worry about anything. Just focus on your work. I tried, but my concentration was shattered. For the remaining 2 days of my trip, I received increasingly disturbing texts from Carol. They're bringing in a lot of stuff for a temporary stay. I think they're mounting a TV on your living room wall. There seems to be some kind of party happening tonight. By the time I boarded my return flight, I was filled with dread. When my rideshare pulled up to my house, I saw Audrey's car in the driveway alongside an unfamiliar truck I assumed belonged to Tyler. Taking a deep breath, I walked into what used to be my sanctuary. The scene that greeted me was worse than I'd imagined. The living room had been completely rearranged to accommodate a gaming setup with Tyler's massive TV and console. Unfamiliar shoes and jackets cluttered the entryway. The kitchen counter was covered with appliances I didn't own and snack foods I never bought. But the real shock came when I walked toward my bedroom and found Audrey's toiletries spread across my bathroom counter. Opening the door to my master bedroom, I discovered her and Tyler's clothing hanging in my closet, their personal items arranged on my dresser, and their phone chargers plugged in beside my bed. They had taken over my bedroom, my private space. I stood there stunned as my mother appeared behind me. "Olive, you're home earlier than we expected," she said, her voice unnaturally bright. "How was your trip? Why are Audrey and Tyler in my bedroom?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Well, we thought it made the most sense. Your room has the attached bathroom, and they have more things than would fit in the smaller bedroom. You don't mind taking the third bedroom for a little while, do you? Just until they get settled somewhere else." I turned to face her, finally finding my voice. "Yes, Mom, I do mind. This is my house, my bedroom. They need to move their things immediately." My father appeared in the hallway, drawn by our raised voices. "Now, Olive, don't be selfish. Audrey and Tyler lost their apartment. They had nowhere else to go. Your sister needs a stable environment right now." "Then they can have the guest room, not my bedroom," I insisted. Audrey and Tyler appeared from the kitchen, Audrey holding a glass of wine that I recognized from my special occasion collection. "Oh, you're back," Audrey said with the same casual air our mother had used. "How was the business thing?" "Audrey, why are you in my bedroom?" I asked directly. She shrugged. "Mom and Dad said it would be better for us to take the master since there are two of us. It's not a big deal, is it? You're just one person." I looked from Audrey to my parents, feeling ambushed and outnumbered in my own home. My father wore the stern expression that had always silenced me as a child. My mother's face showed disappointment, as if I were failing some test of family loyalty. Audrey looked merely inconvenienced by my reaction. Only Tyler had the decency to appear uncomfortable. "This is completely unacceptable," I said firmly. "You all made decisions about my house, my personal space, without even asking me. Audrey and Tyler need to move their things to the guest room tonight. That's final." What followed was a heated argument where my parents accused me of being selfish, materialistic, and cold-hearted. Audrey cried about her housing crisis and claimed I didn't care about her struggles. Even Tyler chimed in about how stressful their situation had been. I stood my ground for the first time in my life, refusing to be emotionally manipulated. After nearly an hour of arguments, a compromise was reached. Audrey and Tyler would move to the guest room the next day, and I would reclaim my bedroom. That night, I slept in the small third bedroom, listening to Audrey and Tyler talking and laughing in my bedroom. My bed sheets, my private space. I lay awake until nearly dawn, a realization slowly crystallizing in my mind. My kindness wasn't being appreciated, it was being exploited. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel angry about it. The next 2 weeks were filled with uncomfortable tension. True to their word, Audrey and Tyler relocated to the guest room, but not without making their displeasure known. They moved slowly, leaving items in my room that I had to collect and deliver to them. They complained about the smaller closet and lack of attached bathroom. They made comments within my hearing about my princess attitude and selfish behavior. My parents sided with them, treating me like the villain in my own home. My mother would fall silent when I entered a room. My father would make pointed comments about family loyalty and support. The message was clear. I was failing them by enforcing basic boundaries. Meanwhile, living with 4 adults in a space designed for my solitary lifestyle became increasingly stressful. The hot water would run out before I could shower. The refrigerator couldn't hold enough food for everyone. The laundry room was constantly in use. Privacy became a distant memory. Items began disappearing from my room. My favorite sweater would appear on Audrey. My expensive face cream would be significantly depleted. My wine collection dwindled bottle by bottle. When confronted, Audrey would respond with casual dismissal. We're sisters. We always shared growing up. It's just a sweater, Olive. Don't be so materialistic. I didn't think you'd mind. It's not like you were using it. I began locking my bedroom door, carrying the key with me even within the house. This prompted more accusations of distrust and selfishness. The real problems began when I started working late. My marketing project required occasional evening hours, and I would return home around 9 or 10 some nights. On these evenings, I'd come home to evidence of parties, empty beer bottles, pizza boxes, unfamiliar jackets forgotten on chairs. Once I found a stranger asleep on my couch, apparently a friend of Tyler's who had drunk too much to drive home. When I confronted Audrey about having parties in my absence, she became defensive. We're not having parties, just a few friends over for dinner. We live here too, you know. Actually, you don't, I replied, my patience finally wearing thin. You're staying here temporarily as guests. This is my house. Audrey's expression changed a smirk forming on her lips. Really? Because Mom and Dad said Tyler and I could stay as long as we want. That statement sent a chill through me. I cornered my parents in the kitchen the next morning before everyone else was awake. We need to talk about time frames, I said firmly. It's been almost 2 months since you moved in. Dad, have you been looking for work? When are you planning to move back to your house? My parents exchanged glances, that same silent communication I'd noticed before. Actually, Olive, we've been reconsidering our plans, my father said slowly. What does that mean? Well, my mother interjected, the housing market has changed significantly. We're thinking it might be better to let the bank take our house, start fresh somewhere more affordable. So, what's your timeline for finding this more affordable place? I asked, already dreading the answer. Another exchange of glances. We haven't quite figured that out yet, my father admitted. These things take time. And Audrey and Tyler. She told me you said they could stay here as long as they want. My mother had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Audrey and Tyler are going through a rough patch. They need stability right now. Is it really so terrible having your family close? I was saved from responding by a work emergency. A client's social media campaign had launched with errors, and I needed to address it immediately. I left the conversation unresolved, promising myself I would return to it with clearer boundaries once the work crisis was handled. 2 days later, I had to make another short business trip. Just 2 days an overnight stay to meet with an important client in a neighboring city. I was reluctant to leave given the unresolved tension, but my career depended on maintaining client relationships. Before leaving, I gathered everyone in the living room for a family meeting. I laid out explicit house rules for my absence. No parties, no rearranging furniture, no entering my bedroom under any circumstances. I made everyone verbally agree to these terms. It's just 2 days, I said. I'll be back tomorrow evening. My meeting went well, wrapping up by mid-afternoon the next day. I decided to drive back earlier than planned, hoping to surprise everyone by arriving during dinner, rather than late evening. Perhaps catching them being respectful of my rules would help rebuild some trust. I pulled into my driveway around 6, noticing all 3 of their cars parked outside. As I approached my front door, I heard activity inside. Voices, movement, the sound of tape being pulled from a roll. Using my key, I entered quietly. What I saw froze me in place. My parents were in the living room packing my books and photos into cardboard boxes. Audrey was removing my clothes from the hallway closet. Tyler was disconnecting my television. They were packing my belongings. What's happening? I asked, my voice barely audible. 4 heads whipped around to stare at me. My mother recovered first. Olive? We weren't expecting you until later. What are you doing with my things? I asked, my voice stronger now. Well, we've been talking, my father said, setting down the box he was filling. And we think we found a solution that works for everyone. What solution? Why are you packing my belongings? My mother stepped forward, her expression a practiced blend of sympathy and determination. Olive, you're doing so well in your career. You can afford to rent an apartment or even buy another house if you want to. Audrey and Tyler are just starting out. They need stability, a foundation to build their future. Your father and I need to stay with them to help get them established. I stood there speechless as they continued packing my things without shame. The reality of the situation dawned on me with sickening clarity. They weren't just overstepping boundaries, they were taking my house. "This is my house," I said, my voice shaking. "My name is on the mortgage. I paid for it. You can't just decide to take it." Audrey rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Olive. We're not taking it. We're just saying it makes more sense for us to live here than you right now. You don't need 3 bedrooms. We do." "That's not for you to decide," I shouted, finally losing my composure. "This is my house. I worked for years to afford it. You can't just pack up my belongings and expect me to leave." My father approached me, his expression stern, the look that had always made me back down as a child. "Olive, we understand you're upset, but try to look at this rationally. You're single, focused on your career. You can live anywhere. Audrey and Tyler need to build a life together. They need root stability. And what about my stability, my roots? This is my home." My mother sighed dramatically. "We raised you to be less materialistic than this, Olive. It's just a house. Family should come first." I looked from face to face, searching for any sign of understanding, any recognition of the magnitude of what they were doing. I found none. Only entitled expectation from Audrey Stern, disapproval from my father, manipulative disappointment from my mother, and uncomfortable avoidance from Tyler. "I want all of you out of my house," I said with a calmness that surprised even me. "Pack your own things and leave. Now." They stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. "You can't be serious," my father finally said. "I've never been more serious in my life. This is my house. I want you out." My mother's expression hardened. "Actually, we've been talking to a lawyer. Since we've been living here, we have established tenant rights. You can't just throw us out." I felt as if I'd been plunged into ice water. "What are you talking about?" My father stepped forward, assuming the authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood. "According to the lawyer we consulted, since we've been residing here for nearly 2 months, and receiving mail at this address, we're legally considered tenants, even without a formal lease. You would need to follow proper eviction procedures, which could take months." I struggled to process this information. My own parents were threatening me with tenancy laws to take over my home. "Remember when you were short on your mortgage payment in February?" My mother added. "We helped you cover the difference. That gives us a financial stake in this property." The memory surfaced immediately. I had been between paychecks due to an accounting error at work, temporarily short by a few $100s. My parents had offered to help, and I'd accepted repaying them the following week. I never imagined they would twist this into a claim of ownership. "I paid you back in full," I said, my voice tight. "And one mortgage payment doesn't give you ownership rights to my house." "That's for a court to decide," my father replied confidently. "Our lawyer seems to think we have a strong case." As the shock began to wear off, another horrible realization dawned on me. "Have you been going through my mail?" My parents exchanged glances. "We've been collecting it for you when you're at work," my mother said defensively. That's hardly going through it. But her averted eyes told me everything. They had been intercepting my mail, including my mortgage statements. Pieces began falling into place. The missed notices about an insurance renewal. The credit card offer I was certain had arrived but couldn't find. The utility bill that mysteriously appeared on my desk after I mentioned not receiving it. "You've been planning this," I whispered, the full betrayal finally clear. "All along. The emergency housing situation, the gradual takeover of my space-establishing residency. You never intended to leave." Neither of my parents denied it. Audrey at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, though she quickly masked it with defiance. "You've always had everything so easy, Olive," she said bitterly. "Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect house. Some of us haven't been so lucky." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "Easy. I worked multiple jobs through high school and college while you partied. I saved for years while you blew every paycheck. I sacrificed to buy this house while you expected handouts. None of this was easy. I earned it." "Well, now it's my turn to have something nice," Audrey snapped. "You can start over. I need this more than you do." I looked at my family, truly seeing them for perhaps the first time. These people were not just boundary crossers or entitled house guests. They were calculated manipulators who had conspired to take what was mine, justifying their theft with twisted logic about family obligation and need. "I'll be speaking to my own lawyer," I said quietly. "And I suggest you all start packing your own belongings, not mine." I turned and walked out, not trusting myself to remain in their presence any longer. I sat in my car, hands shaking so badly I couldn't insert the key into the ignition. Tears streamed down my face as the magnitude of the betrayal washed over me. My family, my own family, the people who should protect me, support me, celebrate my achievements. Instead, they had plotted against me, using my generosity as a weapon. I drove to a nearby hotel in a daze, checking in with just my purse and the clothes on my back. In the sterile hotel room, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. I sobbed until my throat was raw, until my eyes swelled shut, until physical exhaustion temporarily dulled the emotional pain. When the initial shock subsided, I called the only person I could think of, my best friend Jasmine. "They did what?" she exclaimed after I explained the situation. "Olive, that's beyond dysfunctional. That's criminal. They're claiming tenant rights," I said, my voice hoarse from crying, "and trying to say they partially own the house because they helped with one mortgage payment. That's absolute garbage," Jasmine said firmly. "Listen, pack up what you need from that hotel and come stay with me. You can have my guest room as long as you need it. Then tomorrow we're finding you the meanest, toughest real estate lawyer in the city." I accepted her offer gratefully, relocating to her apartment that same night. Sitting in her cozy guest room, surrounded by the few possessions I'd managed to grab, I felt a strange mix of devastation and determination. I had lost my home and my family in one terrible day, but I refused to lose myself. The next morning, I woke with a clear sense of purpose. The tears and shock had subsided, replaced by a steely resolve I hadn't known I possessed. Looking at my reflection in Jasmine's bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the determined woman staring back at me. "No more people-pleasing," I told my reflection. "No more sacrificing my needs for people who don't respect me." My first call was to my company's HR department to inquire about the legal services benefit included in my employee package. By 9 a.m., I had an appointment with a property lawyer for that afternoon. Jasmine insisted on accompanying me, sitting beside me, as I explained my situation to Catherine Powell, a sharp-eyed attorney with 20 years of experience in real estate law. "Let me make sure I understand," Catherine said, leaning forward. "Your parents moved in temporarily, invited your sister and her boyfriend without permission, and are now claiming they have rights to your house based on tenant laws and a single mortgage payment you've already repaid." "Yes," I confirmed, "and they've been intercepting my mail, including mortgage statements." Catherine's eyebrows shot up. "Mail tampering is a federal offense, and as for their claims, they're on extremely shaky legal ground. One repaid mortgage payment doesn't constitute ownership stake. As for tenant rights, yes, they may have established residency, but that doesn't mean you can't evict them. It just means we need to follow proper procedures." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. "So I can get my house back?" "Absolutely," Catherine assured me. "It will take some time and documentation, but your case is very strong. The house is solely in your name, correct? You have all the mortgage documents." I nodded, then hesitated. "Most of them are in the house." "We can get copies from the bank," she said confidently. "First, we'll send a formal eviction notice. That starts the clock. In this state, they'll have 30 days to vacate." As Catherine outlined the strategy, I felt strength returning to my body. This was something concrete, actionable. A path forward. After the meeting, Jasmine and I drove to my neighborhood. Instead of going directly to my house, we stopped at my neighbor Carol's home. She welcomed me with a sympathetic hug. "I've been so worried about you," she said. "Something seemed very wrong with that whole situation." Carol confirmed what I'd suspected. My parents had been telling neighbors that I was generously letting them have the house because they were going through a difficult time. They'd presented Audrey and Tyler as the new homeowners to several people on the street. "It never sat right with me," Carol admitted, "after how proudly you announced buying the place. It seems strange you'd just give it up." With Carol's help, I connected with other neighbors who had observed the situation. Several agreed to provide statements about my parents' claims and behavior, if needed for legal proceedings. Armed with Catherine's advice and community support, I returned to my house the next day. Jasmine insisted on coming with me for backup and as a witness. We arrived mid-morning when I knew everyone would be home. The scene when I entered was surreal. My living room had been completely rearranged. Family photos I didn't recognize hung on the walls. Audrey and Tyler were casually having breakfast at my dining table as if they owned the place. My parents emerged from the kitchen, surprise evident on their faces. "Olive," my mother said cautiously, "we weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I replied coldly, handing each of them an envelope. "This is a formal eviction notice prepared by my attorney. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." My father scoffed, tossing the envelope aside without opening it. "We told you we've spoken to a lawyer. You can't just evict us." "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "I've spoken to my own lawyer. As the sole owner of this property, I have every right to evict tenants following proper procedures, which is exactly what I'm doing." "We help pay for this house," my mother insisted. "We have rights." "One repaid mortgage payment doesn't constitute ownership," I replied, quoting Catherine. "And by the way, tampering with someone else's mail is a federal offense. Would you like to add that to your legal troubles?" For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across my father's face. My mother's confident expression faltered. Audrey stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You can't do this to us. We have nowhere else to go." "You had an apartment before you decided to take over my house," I reminded her. "And if that doesn't work out, you can do what I did. Work hard, save money, and buy your own place." "You're choosing a house over your family," my father said, attempting to regain control with guilt. "I never thought I'd raise such a selfish daughter." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not choosing a house over family. I'm choosing self-respect over being exploited. There's a difference." I turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. I've installed security cameras outside the property. Any attempts to damage the house or remove items that don't belong to you will be recorded and provided to the authorities. You have 30 days." Walking out of that house was one of the hardest and most empowering moments of my life. As Jasmine and I returned to her car, I felt both shaky and strong, terrified and resolute. "I'm proud of you," Jasmine said, squeezing my hand. "That took serious courage." The next few weeks were a roller coaster. My parents attempted several counterattacks. They claimed they had a verbal agreement to share ownership. They produced a handwritten note they claimed was my promise to let them stay indefinitely. They even tried to argue that they had contributed sweat equity by improving the property. Catherine dismantled each claim efficiently. The security cameras proved invaluable when my father attempted to remove some of my appliances, claiming they were theirs. The footage clearly showed him disconnecting my washer and dryer, which I had purchase receipts for. My parents tried one final manipulation, sending relatives to plead their case. My aunt called begging me to reconsider putting my parents on the street. My uncle emailed about family obligations transcending property rights. I held firm, explaining the situation truthfully to each relative. Some understood, others took my parents' side. I accepted that this conflict might permanently alter my extended family relationships, but protecting myself had become non-negotiable. 28 days after serving the eviction notice, I received a call from Catherine. "The judge ruled in our favor," she said. "The sheriff will be present for the formal eviction in 2 days if they haven't vacated by then." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." On day 30, I arrived at my house accompanied by Catherine, Jasmine, and a sheriff's deputy. My parents and Audrey's cars were still in the driveway, suggesting they had ignored the court order. The deputy knocked firmly. "Sheriff's Department, we're here to execute an eviction order." My father opened the door, his face a mask of indignation that faltered at the sight of the uniformed officer. "You have 1 hour to collect essential personal belongings," the deputy informed him. "Any remaining items can be removed during business hours over the next 7 days. After that, anything left will be considered abandoned property." What followed was a tense, silent process of my family gathering immediate necessities under the watchful eye of the deputy. My mother cried quietly occasionally, shooting me wounded looks that no longer had the power to control me. My father maintained rigid, angry silence. Audrey fluctuated between tearful pleas and bitter accusations. Only Tyler approached me directly before leaving. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I told them this was wrong from the beginning. I nodded, but offered no absolution. He had been a participant, however reluctant. As they drove away, I stood in my driveway watching their departure with mixed emotions. Sadness for what our relationship had become, grief for the supportive family I'd never truly had, but also profound relief and a sense of reclaiming not just my physical space, but my autonomy. I turned to face my house, steeling myself for whatever damage awaited inside. The destruction I discovered upon entering my home far exceeded my expectations. It wasn't just the rearrangement of furniture or the disappearance of my belongings. There was malicious damage that could only have been deliberate. Water damage stained the ceiling and walls where they had apparently tried to install a ceiling fan in the living room. The hardwood floors I had lovingly refinished showed deep scratches from furniture being dragged across them. The guest bathroom toilet had overflowed repeatedly, causing damage to the subfloor. My garden had been trampled, plants uprooted. Most disturbing were the walls. In several rooms, they had removed my framed artwork and photos hanging their own in their place. Rather than using the existing hooks they had, pounded new nails haphazardly, leaving dozens of holes. In my bedroom, someone had written "selfish" in permanent marker behind where the headboard had stood. I walked through each room in silence, Jasmine and Catherine trailing behind me, documenting the damage with photographs. The house I had worked so hard for, the sanctuary I had created, had been violated in every possible way. "We'll add property damage to the lawsuit," Catherine said quietly. "This goes beyond normal wear and tear." In the kitchen, I found evidence of their longer-term planning. A notebook contained lists of my possessions categorized as olives to keep, could go either way, and we should get, drafts of their legal arguments, notes about which neighbors they had convinced of their ownership claims. Even more disturbing, I found several of my mortgage statements opened and annotated with notes like late payment opportunity and could claim financial hardship contributed. I sank into one of the few remaining chairs, overwhelmed by the calculated nature of their betrayal. This wasn't opportunistic. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. They had planned for months to take my house, waiting for the right vulnerability to exploit. "I can't stay here tonight," I told Jasmine. "Not yet." She nodded, understanding. "My guest room is yours for as long as you need." The process of reclaiming my space became a metaphor for reclaiming my life. First came the practical necessities: changing the locks, repairing the worst of the damage, replacing essential furniture they had taken or ruined. I took a week off work, dedicating myself to making the house physically functional again. Then came the deeper work. I enlisted a therapist to help me process the profound betrayal and establish healthier boundaries. Dr. Landry specialized in family trauma and quickly identified patterns in my relationship with my parents and sister. "You were parentified from a young age," she explained during one session, "made responsible for your sister, while simultaneously being held to a higher standard. This created a perfect dynamic for exploitation. You were trained to give while they were trained to take." The validation of my experience was both painful and healing. I wasn't crazy for feeling used. I wasn't selfish for protecting myself. I had been systematically conditioned to accept unbalanced relationships. As I worked through these realizations, I also worked on my house. I repainted every room, choosing colors that reflected my personality, rather than the neutral tones I'd selected to please potential visitors. I rearranged furniture to maximize my comfort, rather than accommodate future guests. I created the home I wanted, not the home I thought would gain approval. "I'm turning the third bedroom into a reading room," I told Jasmine as we assembled a comfortable window seat. "Just for me, with all my favorite books and a place to curl up with tea." "That sounds perfect," she replied with a supportive smile. The question of contact with my family loomed large. For the first month, I maintained complete silence, blocking their numbers and emails. I needed space to heal without their manipulations. When my father attempted to contact me through my workplace, I informed security not to allow him entry and documented the incident for the ongoing legal proceedings. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard various versions of the story they were telling: that I had promised them the house and reneged, that they had substantially contributed financially, that I had tricked and betrayed them. I no longer cared about correcting these narratives. Those who knew me understood the truth. Those who believed their stories weren't people I needed in my life. 6 months after the eviction, my house felt like mine again. The legal proceedings resulted in a judgment against my parents for property damage, though I held little hope of collecting the money. The restraining order I had obtained after my father's workplace visit was still in effect, providing both practical protection and psychological boundary reinforcement. I had created a new network of support through friends, colleagues, and community involvement. I held small dinner parties where guests respected my space and boundaries. I joined a hiking group that explored local trails on weekends. I volunteered at an adult literacy program, teaching reading skills to determined adults working to improve their lives. Through these connections, I rediscovered what healthy relationships felt like: mutual respect, reciprocity, genuine care without exploitation. The contrast with my family relationships was stark and educational. Then one day, nearly 7 months after the eviction, I received a text from an unknown number. "It's Audrey. Can we talk?" My first instinct was to block the number immediately. Dr. Landry and I had discussed the possibility of family members attempting to reestablish contact. "You don't owe them a response," she had advised. "But if you choose to engage, do so only with clear boundaries and from a position of emotional strength." After careful consideration, I replied with a single question: "What do you want to talk about?" Audrey's response surprised me. "I want to apologize. In person if possible. No mom and dad, just me." And we arranged to meet at a public coffee shop near my office. I arrived early, selecting a table with a clear view of the entrance and exit. When Audrey walked in, I barely recognized her. The confident, entitled sister I remembered had been replaced by someone who looked tired and uncertain. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I haven't agreed to anything beyond this conversation," I replied carefully. She nodded. "That's fair." She twisted her hands nervously before continuing. "Tyler left me, right after everything that happened. He said he couldn't be with someone who would do that to their own sister." I maintained neutral silence, neither offering sympathy nor expressing satisfaction. "I moved back in with mom and dad," she continued. "At first I believed all their justifications about how you owed us, how we deserved the house more than you. But living with them, watching how they manipulate situations, started to open my eyes." She described a gradual awakening to patterns she'd previously been too privileged to notice. How our parents subtly pit us against each other. How they used guilt and obligation to control both of us in different ways. How her golden child status came with invisible chains. "I'm not saying this excuses what I did," she clarified. "It doesn't. What we did to you was wrong, period. I knew it was wrong even while I was doing it, and I'm deeply ashamed." "What do you want from me, Audrey?" I asked directly. "Nothing," she said quickly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a relationship. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what we did, and I'm sorry for my part in it." I studied her face, searching for the manipulation I'd learned to detect. I found only nervous sincerity. "I appreciate the apology," I said finally. "I can't tell you where this goes from here, but acknowledgement is something." We talked for nearly an hour. Audrey shared that she had started therapy and found a job as a receptionist at a dental office, her longest continuous employment to date. She had also enrolled in community college classes, working toward a dental hygienist certification. "I realized I need to build my own life," she said, "not just wait for someone to give me one." As we parted, she handed me an envelope. "Mom and Dad don't know I'm giving you this. It's not much, but it's a start toward repaying the damage." Inside was a check for $500 and a handwritten note promising monthly payments until her share of the damage costs was covered. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from my parents. Unlike Audrey's genuine apology, theirs was filled with qualified statements and subtle blame shifting. "We're sorry if you felt hurt by our actions. While we still believe we had legitimate claims, if you had communicated your expectations more clearly." I read it once, then filed it away. I had no obligation to accept an apology that wasn't really an apology. Over the following year, Audrey continued making monthly damage payments as promised. We occasionally met for coffee, rebuilding a cautious relationship based on new boundaries and expectations. My parents made several attempts to reestablish contact on their terms. Each declined unless preceded by genuine accountability. On the 1 year anniversary of reclaiming my home, I hosted a small gathering of the people who had supported me through the ordeal. Jasmine, Catherine, Carol colleagues who had covered for me during my worst days, and friends who had helped me rebuild both my house and my sense of self. As we raised glasses in celebration, I reflected on everything I had learned. That generosity without boundaries isn't really generosity, but self-abandonment. That real family is defined by mutual respect and support, not blood relation. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, but essential. That rebuilding after betrayal is possible, and sometimes results in something stronger than before. I stood in my reading room later that evening after everyone had gone. The space that had once been intended as a guest room for family visits was now my favorite sanctuary. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes that inspired and comforted me. The window seat overlooked my rejuvenated garden, where new plants had replaced those trampled during the occupation. The house was quiet, peaceful, mine. Not just legally, but in every sense that mattered. I had reclaimed my space, my boundaries, and my right to define what family meant to me. Looking back, I realized that losing my house temporarily had ultimately given me something far more valuable: the courage to build a life centered on self-respect rather than approval seeking, the wisdom to recognize healthy versus exploitative relationships, the strength to stand firm when pressured to sacrifice my needs for others' wants. I had lost a house for a brief time but found a home within myself that could never be taken away. I want to ask you, has anyone in your family ever taken advantage of your generosity? How did you handle it, and what boundaries did you set afterward? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is more supportive than the one we're born into.